Alright, welcome to another episode of Mo Money Mo Problems, the Budget Deck Tech Show with me, Brian, your host. This week we are doing the red slice of the pie, and I think this is probably my favorite out of the four that we've done so far. Green comes next, so we'll see about that one. But this one so far I think is my favorite. It's a red devotion burn deck, and it's real janky. I love me some janky. If you know me, I love janky. It's a fun, quirky, uh yeah. So 49.7, just under $50. That's the point of this show. Try to build a deck under $50 that will allow for a jumping off point to get into the format. Allow you to play competitively for not a whole lot of dollars. Normally decks go from anywhere from $400 to $800, and that is inaccessible to a lot of people. So $50, still money. That is money. That's half 100. If you didn't know what 50 was, but it's significantly less than 400, I would say. So I think having competitive, accessible decks as good jumping off points gives you somewhere to start, and then you kind of trade for more cards as you go along. And I'll talk about the cards that you might want to look at later on in the video. So let's start with Nykthos. Colin's favorite deck or favorite card out of the Theros block. One of my favorite cards out of the Theros block. It is a land that taps for your devotion. If you don't know what devotion is, it is a mechanic that counts the number of mana symbols of a specific color in the permanents that you control. So, for example, if I have an Ash Zealot in play, then my devotion is 2. If I have 2 Ash Zealots in play, my devotion is 4. 2 red, specifically red. So you tap 2 colorless mana, you tap this, and then you get mana of the color of the devotion that you choose. Did that make sense? Look it up if that didn't make sense. But anyways, this is a deck that cares about devotion. So all the creatures have as much mana symbols in their casting cost as possible. All the permanents, all the creatures. So first off, Ash Zealot. This was a strong card back when it was in Standard. I'm surprised that it's this cheap now, because it's still a very good card. But it is 2/2 for 2, gives you 2 red devotion, first strike, and haste. The haste is really strong, and I mean the first strike is too. But and then it also says that when a player casts a spell from a graveyard, it deals 3 damage to that player. This includes you, but you're not going to be doing that in this deck. But this is good against decks that play things like Snapcaster Mage, or any sort of flashback, or any sort of graveyard shenanigans. This card is a good combatant of that. But also 2 red devotion. That's the important part. Boros Reckoner. 3 red devotion. Which is a 3/3 for 3, and whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target creature or player. So it diverts the damage. You can see what's going. You can see it in the art. He's diverting a lightning bolt, which is cool. And then you can also give him first strike for 1. He's a strong guy. I mean, when he was in Standard as well, very, very strong. $15 when he was in Standard. I remember that. I traded for one of those guys. It was hard to do. I didn't have quite a lot of cards back then, but yeah. I mean, yeah, great card. 3 devotion. Burning Tree Emissary. 2/2 for 2. 2 red devotion you get from this, and it gives you a red and a green when it comes into play. So you can use this to play some of your 1-drops, or this 2 mana can go into Nykthos to tap, and then you have +2 devotion. So you're gaining a lot of mana this way, or you're being very mana efficient, I should say. Fanatic of Mogis. Yeah, tell me how to say that in the comments below. But anyways, this is one of your main win conditions. When you drop this guy, he deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. That's why devotion is so key. He's one of the reasons why devotion is so key in this deck. You drop him on turn 4, and in just pure solitaire, yeah, solitaire goldfishing. He normally hits for anywhere from 6 to 11 damage when he drops down, depending on how much mana you've been able to cheat out with Burning Tree emissaries and Nykthos. But yeah, he's your game winner right here, and he gets even stronger with another card that we'll talk about later. Goblin War Driver, just more devotion, 2 red devotion for a 2/2 Battle Cry. Battle Cry says that when this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So, for creatures like Ash Zealot or Boris Reckoner, which you can give him first strike, the pump to the power is actually a lot stronger than for other creatures. I mean, it makes it a lot more relevant. So I think this is a good card to have in here. Rakdos Cackler, one of the 2 1-drop creatures in this deck. And you're probably most of the time going to unleash him, which says that when you play him, you can put a 1/1 counter on him, but then he can't block. So he's a 2/2 for 1, but he can't block, which I think is still very, very strong. I mean, like, think about all the 2/2s for 1 out there. They all have some sort of large drawback, and this guy, he can be pretty intimidating. I mean, look at him. Look at those spikes. It's intimidating. Wild Cantor. This is a sort of a Monodork-ish. He's a 1/1 for 1. He gives you 1 red devotion. I forgot to say that this guy also gives you 1 red devotion, but then you can sacrifice him and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, which actually comes in handy a lot. Sometimes you get stuck on 3 mana and you've got a Fanatic in your hand, and you just need to play the Fanatic because you're going to drop the Fanatic and do a bunch of stuff, and it's going to deal a bunch of damage. And this guy enables that. He also has a green in his mana symbol, so that gives you something to do with the green mana that the Burning Tree Emissary produces. Sometimes you'll play him and you'll only be able to use the red mana, which is kind of a bummer. It feels like a waste, even though it is still mana efficient. But this gives you something to cast that with as well as giving you red devotion. Let's talk about the sorceries. Banefire. This is another game winner. This is an X burn spell. So X and a red to deal X damage to target creature or player. But the key point on here is, and this is why we chose Banefire over the other variants of this card, because there's a lot of cards that do basically the same thing. It cannot, if X is 5 or more, it can be countered and the damage can't be prevented. This is key. This is because this is your winning card. You're gonna cast this where X is more than 5. And since this is your winning card, if somehow it fizzles or gets negated or anything, that sucks. That you pour a whole lot of resources into it and then suddenly it's useless. You just lost a card. I mean, yeah, that sucks. So having that ability is a big key to why that was the variant of this card that we chose. We did choose another, and I say we, and I mean I, because I built this deck. Cullen had nothing to do with it. That's not true, but it was mainly me. This is kind of the sort of the original variant of this. It's just deals X damage, but you can pay 1 to split the targets, and then you divide the damage evenly. So the reason why I chose to include this, partly to bring down the cost, but also because you can use this as a board wipe if need be. If you've got a bunch of creatures down, but their creatures are really getting in your way, you can use this to just target their creatures, maybe do like a couple damage to them, but just mainly this can be used as a board wipe. You can produce enough mana to make this, like for example, if they have a Spellskite, that would keep you from, killing them with this, but this way you can kill the Spellskite and then also deal damage to other things as well. Lightning Bolt. Red burn, you gotta have Lightning Bolt. I mean, this is the burn card, I was considering for a while running some other cards that were similar to Lightning Bolt, like Lava Spike or Rift Bolt, but I decided that it was more important to have creatures and permanents that provided devotion rather than just more lightning bolt variances. Also, that also brings down the cost because, like for example, Rift Bolt is also about 250 each. Then 18 Mountains and 3 Nykthos. We already talked about Nykthos. And then finally, our enchantment of the day, Quest for Pure Flame. I love this card. This card's great. So it says whenever a source you control deals damage to an opponent, so this could be a creature or a sorcery, so a lightning bolt or anything, as long as it's you control to a creature, you put a quest counter on Quest for Pure Flame. When you've got 4 counters, 4 or more, you just remove 4 and you sacrifice the quest. And then for the rest of your turn, all sources you control deal double damage to creatures and players. Amazing. This is the other key to the puzzle. This is what does it. Because, you know, you may not be attacking in with your creatures because they may be putting out more value creatures. You know, your creatures may just serve for devotion. That's, you know, that may be what they're there for only. But this, because it's hard to, you know, tap for 21 mana, because that's what you would need to get them from 20 to 0 just with 1, or get 20 devotion on the field. This guy really, really puts that over the edge. Putting 4 stacks on him can be kind of troublesome sometimes. That's why if you have a hand where this guy is in your hand and you've got enough mana to, you know, play other stuff and you keep the hand, this is the first card you want to play. Because any damage that you do from that point will put stacks on them. And then he just sits there. You know, he adds devotion as well. I don't know why I'm, you know, saying it's a he. It's an enchantment. It adds devotion as well. And then you can sacrifice it after you've counted all your devotion. So like you play Fanatic, it counts the devotion, and then while that ability's on the stack, you sacrifice Quest. And then so Fanatic's already counted the devotion, and then Quest's ability then resolves first. Same with tapping Nykthos. You count all your devotion, you cast Banefire, and then while Banefire's on the stack, you sacrifice Quest. And so then that ability resolves first, and the devotion was counted. And then that way, that really secures the game. This card, I think, is really what allows this deck to win on turn 4. Because you can definitely win on turn 4. Just dropping a Fanatic on turn 4 and dealing 11 damage times 2. Or if you've got more than one quest out, you know, times 4, times 8. It's insane. Actually, it's not even... Wait, hold on. Is it exponential? I don't have the time to think about that. Anyways, this deck is really cool. Really janky. Doesn't always work, but I really, really like this deck. It's got a lot of flavor, I think, involved, and a lot of really cool cards that I really liked back from the Ravnica block. All 3 of these cards I really liked back in the Ravnica block. This is one of my favorite decks that I've built so far, honestly. Not to hype myself up too much, but let's talk about real quick some cards that you would look for to trade for this deck. First and foremost, Eidolon of the Great Revel. It's a card that was in the Theros block. It is a 2/2 for 2. Also gives you 2 red devotion, and it says whenever a player casts a card that has converted mana cost 3 or less, it deals 2 damage to that player. Now, this kind of seems really bad, and if you haven't heard about this card, I can understand why you would be like, that's kind of gross. Why would I ever want to play that? But this card is played in Legacy, Modern, and was played in Standard when it was in Standard. It was played in all formats, just because of how strong it is. If you're on the play and you get this guy out on turn 2, suddenly, you know, most cards that they want to play on turn 3 become very much... You know, there's a much larger downside for them to play cards that they want to play. And it still gives 2 red devotion. So that is something that I would consider first and foremost putting into this deck. There's not a whole lot of other cards that jump to mind right now. If you guys have any cards that you're screaming at me like, hey, why didn't you mention this card? This card's great. Definitely drop a comment. If you have a variant of this deck that you've tested out and did well, please, by all means. I mean, this is meant to be a jumping off point for ideas, people who want to get into Modern, because $400 to $800 is not accessible to most people. And that's why budget deck lists are cool. I like looking at budget deck lists, and I like having budget deck lists that are competitive, that will allow people access into the format, and then start like winning packs that way, or being able to trade for cards that they want. So yeah, if you like this deck, definitely like, subscribe, because we're gonna do green tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. I'm unsure of exactly what we're going to do, but yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.